I used to believe that the only way to truly succeed in life was by putting everything into my career. After all, what good is love if you can't provide for the person you care about? What good is a relationship if you're not building a future for it? I've always wanted to prove myself. I was raised with the idea that success and ambition were what mattered most. Love felt secondary. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I had everything planned out. My job was stable, my future seemed secure. But then there was Emily. She was the one thing that felt real in my life. I met her when I was still figuring everything out, and for a while, it felt like we were unstoppable. But ambition kept pulling me away. The longer I was with her, the more I felt like I was losing myself. I thought that if I just focused on building a successful career, everything would fall into place. She would understand. But the more I gave to my career, the less I gave to her, and it started to eat at me. I could see it in her eyes, the frustration, the longing. She wanted more from me, more than just a man who was always busy, always working. She wanted someone who was there, emotionally, mentally. And I wasn't. I had convinced myself that the only way I could be a good partner was by being successful, by having a lot of money, by providing things I thought would fill the void. But Emily didn't want things. She wanted me. She wanted us to grow together, to build something with more than just material stability. She wanted to love me without me having to prove anything. And I didn't know how to do that. The problem was, I didn't realize how much I'd taken her for granted. The harder I worked, the more she seemed distant. But I kept telling myself, I'm doing this for us, for the future. I was so wrapped up in this belief bubble that I couldn't see that I was losing her in the process. I couldn't see that love wasn't just about what you could give in terms of money or success. It was about presence. It was about the connection. But at the time, I didn't know any better. I thought the sacrifices were worth it. I thought if I just pushed a little harder, everything would fall into place. I knew I had to make a choice. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, the tension building every time I looked at Emily. She was slipping away, and I couldn't figure out how to stop it. I kept telling myself I was doing this for us, that one day she'd see the bigger picture. But the more I focused on my work, the more I saw the hurt in her eyes. It wasn't just the quiet dinners, the missed weekends, it was something deeper. I wasn't there for her in the way she needed me to be. I loved her, I really did. But the truth was, I wasn't giving her what she needed. She wanted me, not the idea of me as some successful man who was always too busy to notice the small things. She deserved more than my hollow promises. The guilt ate at me constantly, but I couldn't seem to break free of my own beliefs, my own need to prove I was doing the right thing by working so hard. But the truth was, I didn't know how to balance both. One evening, after another argument that had spiraled over something insignificant, I said the words that would change everything. Maybe we should take a break. Maybe we need some time apart to figure things out. The silence that followed felt like a weight on my chest. I could see it in her eyes, the realization that this was what I'd been hinting at for weeks. She didn't argue. She didn't beg me to stay. She just nodded, quietly, as if she already knew the decision had been made long before I said it out loud. I walked away thinking it was the right thing to do, that time apart would give us clarity. But even as I left that night, I felt the finality of it. It wasn't just a break anymore, it was a breakup. I thought I was doing the noble thing by setting her free. She deserved more than a man who wasn't emotionally present. But deep down, I knew I was scared. Scared of losing her, scared of facing the truth that I couldn't be everything I thought I should be. And scared that I might have just made the biggest mistake of my life. The days after the breakup felt like an endless blur. I thought I'd feel relieved, but instead, there was this overwhelming emptiness. I kept replaying everything in my mind, every word, every look we had exchanged. I wanted to believe I made the right choice. I kept telling myself that she'd be better off without me, that she deserved someone who could give her everything she wanted. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. I kept telling myself it was for the best, but every time I saw something that reminded me of her, our favorite cafe, a song we used to listen to. I felt the weight of the lie I had told myself. I couldn't escape the truth. I wasn't ready to let go. But there was something else, too. A nagging feeling that I had only half faced the truth. I kept wondering, was I really giving up on her for the right reasons? Or was it because I was too afraid to face the consequences of my choices? I tried to keep busy. I threw myself into my work, hoping it would help me forget, but it only made everything worse. Every meeting, every project, it all felt hollow. I couldn't escape the thought of Emily. Her absence in my life was a constant reminder of how much I had neglected her, of how I'd missed the signs that we were drifting apart. One night, I came across an old message from her, one of those texts she'd sent when we were still happy. She told me she loved me and was proud of everything I was achieving. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't seen it then, but now it was clear. She was proud of me, not just for what I could give her materially, but for who I was. And I hadn't even realized that was enough for her. I was struggling to accept that maybe I hadn't been the partner she needed because I hadn't been able to see things from her perspective. I was so focused on what I thought was best for us that I missed the most important part: her heart. Her feelings. I thought the love we had was enough, but it wasn't. I had to face the truth that I wasn't as emotionally available as I should have been, and it hurt. After the breakup, I didn't just lose Emily, I lost a part of myself. I spent so much time trying to be someone I thought I should be, someone who could provide, someone who could achieve. But I didn't realize how much of myself I had sacrificed in the process. Now that she was gone, I felt like I had nothing left to show for all my hard work. I tried to move on, telling myself I'd eventually feel better. But it didn't come. I kept questioning my own worth. What was the point of all the success if it hadn't been enough to keep the one person who meant the most to me? I had all these material things, this career I had built, but they felt like nothing without someone to share them with. I had the money, the status, but none of it mattered if I was alone. The guilt was overwhelming. I started doubting myself in ways I hadn't before. Was I really the kind of man I thought I was? Was I as successful as I had convinced myself? Or was I just someone who used ambition as an excuse to avoid dealing with what really mattered? It ate at me every day. I began to see how much I had neglected the emotional side of my life, the part that made me feel human, the part that was connected to love, connection, and vulnerability. I was so focused on proving myself that I had pushed away the very thing that gave me value beyond all the external achievements. It wasn't just about losing Emily. It was about realizing how much of myself I had lost along the way. I wasn't just a successful man. I was a man who had neglected the people who cared about him, and in doing so, had lost touch with his own emotional core. That realization hit harder than any failure in my career ever had. The days turned into weeks, and the emptiness didn't fade. If anything, it only deepened. I woke up every morning to the same heavy feeling in my chest, the one I tried to ignore for so long, the one that I thought would go away once I achieved success. But now, it was all so clear. Success without love felt like nothing at all. I was crushed, weighed down by the choices I had made. The absence of Emily felt like a constant ache, like I was missing a part of myself I could never get back. It wasn't just loneliness. It was the guilt, the regret, the constant questioning of what could have been. I had been so blinded by my own ambitions that I hadn't even realized how deeply I was hurting her. The memory of her smile, her touch, it haunted me. And I began to see her not just as the woman I lost, but as the person I had failed. Every memory we shared now felt like a cruel reminder of what I had taken for granted. I could hardly sleep at night, replaying our last conversations over and over in my mind, wondering where I went wrong, wondering if there was something I could have done differently. The thought of her moving on, of her finding someone who could give her the love and attention I hadn't, gnawed at me. I had no one to blame but myself. There were moments when I would see her in my dreams, and in those moments, everything seemed right again. But when I woke up, the harsh reality hit me like a punch to the gut. The guilt only deepened, and I couldn't escape the sense that I had let the best thing in my life slip away. I tried to distract myself, went out with friends, threw myself back into work, but nothing worked. Nothing could fill the hole in my heart. The pain of losing Emily, of losing my chance at real love, was more excruciating than anything I'd ever felt. It was the kind of pain that stayed with you long after you thought it would go away, the kind that makes you question every decision you've ever made. I tried to keep everything together, but the weight of it all was too much. I was breaking down inside, and I knew I couldn't handle it on my own anymore. I had spent so long pushing people away, focusing only on my career, thinking I could fix everything by myself. But now, I realized that wasn't the answer. I needed someone to talk to. I needed support, real support, from people who cared about me. It wasn't easy to reach out. I had always prided myself on being independent, on not needing anyone. But I couldn't pretend anymore. I called my best friend, Matt, the one person who had always been there, no matter what. He answered on the second ring. "Hey man. You alright?" His voice was warm, but I could hear the concern underneath. "I'm not," I admitted, my voice breaking. "I messed up, Matt. I messed up with Emily. And I don't know how to fix it." There was a long pause on the other end, and then he said the words I needed to hear. "You can't fix everything. But you can start by being honest with yourself." It wasn't some grand solution, but it was the first thing that made me feel like I wasn't alone in this. He didn't offer advice right away. Instead, he let me vent, let me say everything I had been holding in for so long. It felt like the first time in weeks I could breathe again, like I wasn't drowning in my own guilt. After that conversation, I reached out to my family. I talked to my parents, my sister. They didn't judge me. They didn't tell me I was wrong. They listened. They reminded me that I was still loved, that I wasn't defined by my mistakes. Slowly, I started to realize something important, that I didn't have to go through this alone. My pride had been holding me back from accepting help, from leaning on the people who cared about me. But now, I understood the value of support, of allowing others into my pain. It wasn't easy, and there were still days when I felt like I couldn't go on. But with their support, I began to see a glimmer of hope again. It wasn't about fixing everything overnight, but taking small steps toward healing. It wasn't instant, but over time, I began to feel a shift. With the support of my friends and family, I started to pick myself up. I realized that healing wasn't just about fixing the situation with Emily. It was about reclaiming myself, about finding the strength to stand on my own again. At first, it felt like I was moving in slow motion, like the weight of everything was still on my shoulders. I woke up each morning, reminding myself that I had to take things one step at a time. There were days when the guilt crept back in, when the regret washed over me like a tidal wave. But I learned to sit with those feelings instead of letting them control me. I allowed myself to feel the pain, but I didn't let it define me. I started focusing on the things that made me happy outside of work, things I had neglected for so long. I went hiking in the mountains, a hobby I had always loved but hadn't made time for. I spent time with my dog, Max, who never judged me and always seemed to know when I needed company. I reconnected with old friends, those who had always been there for me, even when I was too wrapped up in my career to see it. As I gave myself the time and space to heal, I also began to realize something important. I had been so focused on doing for others, working hard, achieving goals, that I had forgotten how to just be. I needed to learn how to be at peace with myself, to be content in my own company. To not depend on external validation for my happiness. It wasn't easy. There were times when I felt like I wasn't making progress, when I felt like I was stuck in the same place, unable to move forward. But slowly, I started to notice changes within myself. I was kinder to myself, more patient. I began to accept my flaws and my mistakes, and most importantly, I started to forgive myself. It wasn't about pretending the past didn't happen, it was about learning from it and moving forward with a clearer sense of who I was and what I wanted. I knew it would take time to truly heal, to let go of the past completely. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was heading in the right direction. I wasn't there yet, but I was getting closer. It had been months since the breakup, and I had finally begun to feel like myself again. My career was moving forward, I was taking better care of my health, and I had started rebuilding relationships with friends and family. But there was still one thing I hadn't fully addressed: love. I wasn't sure if I was ready for it yet, but a part of me was beginning to wonder if maybe there was a chance for me to experience it again. It wasn't about replacing Emily. It was about allowing myself the possibility of happiness with someone new. I had learned so much from my past relationship, and I didn't want to make the same mistakes. I needed to rebuild my trust in others and, more importantly, in myself. It happened unexpectedly. I had met Sarah at a local coffee shop, of all places. She was warm, friendly, and had a calm confidence about her that immediately drew me in. We started talking about life, our careers, and the strange coincidences that had brought us both to the same place at the same time. It was casual at first, just a conversation between two strangers, but as the weeks went by, we kept running into each other. We'd laugh, share stories, and gradually it felt like there was a genuine connection growing between us. At first, I hesitated. I was cautious, not sure if I was ready to let someone into my heart again. I didn't want to rush into something out of loneliness or a desire to prove I could find someone better. But as I spent more time with Sarah, I realized she wasn't someone I needed to compare to Emily. She was just Sarah, and the connection we shared was unique. We took things slowly, building trust one conversation at a time. I was open with her about my past, about my fears and my mistakes. She listened without judgment and shared her own experiences. I could see that she, too, had her own scars, her own journey of healing. And somehow, in all the vulnerability, there was this quiet, reassuring understanding between us. I knew it wasn't going to be easy to completely open up and trust again. But I also knew that healing wasn't about closing myself off, it was about allowing myself to trust again. To risk loving someone else. As time went on, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could love again, and it wouldn't be the same as before. It would be different, better, because it was rooted in understanding, patience, and the lessons learned from the past. As time passed, I started to feel something that I hadn't felt in a long time: joy. Real, genuine joy. It wasn't the kind of happiness I used to chase through achievements or external validation. It was quieter, deeper, rooted in contentment, in peace with who I had become, and in the connection I had with Sarah. Our relationship had grown steadily, slowly, and unlike anything I had ever experienced before. With Sarah, there was no rush, no pressure. It felt like we were building something meaningful, brick by brick. She never tried to force anything, and neither did I. We both understood the value of patience. I wasn't trying to recreate the past, and I wasn't comparing her to Emily. I was simply enjoying getting to know Sarah for who she was. There were moments when I caught myself thinking about Emily, wondering how she was doing, hoping she had found peace too. I didn't hold on to the past anymore. It was just a natural reflection, like when you look back on a chapter of your life with gratitude for the lessons it taught you, without dwelling on what could have been. I had forgiven myself, and I had forgiven Emily too. Our time together had ended for a reason, and I could see that now. With Sarah, I felt a sense of hope I hadn't realized I'd been missing. She was kind, caring, and always made me feel like I was enough. The insecurities I had once carried about not being good enough, about not measuring up to some perfect standard, seemed to melt away. She accepted me for who I was, and she encouraged me to keep growing, to keep challenging myself, just as I encouraged her to do the same. One evening, as we sat together watching the sunset, Sarah turned to me with a smile that seemed to light up everything around us. "You know," she said softly, "I think we've both come so far. I'm really proud of you." I smiled back, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "I'm proud of you too, Sarah. We've come a long way, haven't we?" In that moment, I realized that love isn't about finding perfection, it's about finding someone who understands you, who challenges you to be better, and who loves you through it all. I had spent so much time fearing that I'd never be able to trust again, that I'd never find happiness after the heartbreak. But now, I understood that happiness comes when you stop looking for it outside yourself and allow it to come naturally. I had learned that love is a journey, one where healing, growth, and trust are all part of the process. And I was ready to embrace it, fully, with Sarah by my side. As I look back on everything that's happened, I can't help but feel a sense of peace. Life, as it turns out, doesn't always go according to plan. But sometimes, the detours lead you to places more beautiful than you could have imagined. When I was caught in the whirlwind of my past, I never could have guessed that all of it would bring me here, to a place where I could truly be happy again. In the beginning, I had feared that I would never be the same person again. I worried that I would always be haunted by the pain of my breakup with Emily, or that I would never be able to trust or love again. But as I moved through the stages of healing, I discovered something important. I was not broken. I had been changed, yes, but I was stronger for it. The person I had become was someone who could love more fully, who understood the true value of vulnerability, and who had learned to forgive not just others, but himself.